Hey guys, I'm your host Smitha and welcome to Journey Podcast, your weekly podcast on transformational journeys. Hello everyone, I have Alicia today with me. She is a senior technology director turned into a personal development junkie on a mission to help other corporate technology women, realizing the power of their stories. We can all rise above our stories to fall madly in love with ourselves. She recently decided to take her passion for helping women and creating a coaching practice, specializing in mindset empowerment coaching. We can find her sharing her story more deeply in her blog, Modern Portrait of the Woman. And I'm leaving this floor to her to talk about her story a little more in depth with all the traumas that she has gone through and what kind of a woman that she has become today. Welcome, Alicia, to the show.
Thank you. I appreciate, so I just want to pause for a moment and say thank you, Smitha, for creating such a powerful space for people who have gone through trauma, people who are experiencing trauma. I think creating this space is so important for people to, this is something that so many people go through and we just don't talk about it. So I think it's such an important conversation. So thank you for creating this space. As Smitha mentioned, I am recently retired, so to speak, from the corporate world. And this is, I'm just 6 weeks into my new adventure of writing, speaking, and creating my own coaching practice. And I've had 20 years of a really successful career in technology. I was a senior director. By all measures, I was really successful and should have been super happy.
If I can add a little point there, I mean, me being in the technology industry, having a profile like you is super powerful. And I can't imagine like you leaving that space to help another woman. That is so great of you. Leaving that, and you just wanted to help other women to come out of their traumas or like their problems, and you are actually teaching them how to do it. And I'm really, really like happy, and I feel so great to meet you as a person like this and talking to you today, leaving that kind of a profile, and it's really amazing.
Thank you. It's interesting. I was living almost two lives, and I felt that way. I felt this as I grew, in age. I'm 41. So as I grew and as my profession grew, I was moving to be a VP, I was on a track to be a CIO. And I was at this crossroads where I had to make a decision. And so it was just what was once a whisper became like this very loud shout, like, you have to go do this. And I think the thing that was underlying was my childhood trauma. Now, it wasn't until about a year, I think it was April of 2019, that I actually first said this out loud. So I had never actually admitted it or said it in these words. So, and that became really powerful for me. I spoke to an audience of about 90 women and told them, not as much as I'm about to go into today, but I told them, and it was the first time that I'd shared it in a public venue. And it was in that moment that I realized I had this segregation inside of me, this part of me, which was this childhood trauma that I had taken. And how I describe it is I took it and I packaged it up and I put it in a closet. And in that moment, when I shared it, again, just a little piece, it opened up the closet, and it opened up this piece of me that had been wanting to serve, but didn't know how. And so that's like, I guess, a really big moment, I guess, in my life where I shared that and expressed it. But I wanted to start with, where I am today. So now I've got 2 children. I'm a mother. I'm a wife. I have, had a great successful career, and now I'm moving into this new space. And so I think there are so many people that say to me, Alicia, how are you so confident? Wow, you must have really had a great framework and structure growing up.
About to ask you, I really want to ask you, because the way you are presenting, even when you are saying like it's a childhood trauma, it's something like that you are not really comfortable, that you never shared about. But the confidence that you are saying, just putting up those words, is awesome. Keep going. Sorry.
Thank you. Thank you. I had somebody actually at my last, and just to hit this point home, I had somebody in my last position. He was also a senior director, and we had gotten to a work debate about something. And he had said, if you didn't have such a hoity-toity upbringing, you would understand us people that grew up with humble beginnings. And it wasn't until it's funny because this is how we became really good friends, because I was like, wait, how do you see me? And so it was really interesting, this exploration, but that's a sidebar. Okay, so I'm going to go back to, I want to go back to, I think the first moment that I realized something was wrong, or that something, I recognized, there are a couple of key milestones that have happened in my life. And so I think the first one was when I was 10, and I realized I was so sad. I was so sad. Like, it was just this bottomless pit of sadness. Now, I didn't associate at the time because I didn't have the words or the understanding like I do now. But at 10, I realized I was just so sad, and I could not understand why I was so sad. And so I started drinking at 10, and I started consuming a large amount of alcohol. Now, this wasn't every day, but the first time it happened, I recognized that I could disappear. I could drink and I could black out and I could disappear, and that pain, that depth of pain that I felt could go away. And it wasn't permanent, but it was for a period, and I could escape. And so it was in this moment, this was like a first really big milestone, and where I started, using different coping mechanisms in order to hide from this pain. And often, again, up until through my 30s, I have always talked about it as this pain or this darkness. And I never connected the two things, and the sadness or this deep depression that I felt actually stemmed from being physically, verbally, and emotionally abused my entire life. And so at 10, that was, a moment where I realized this. But then I think, there were a couple of really key other points in my life. So at 10, I think the abuse with my father started pretty young. It was, it wasn't spankings, this was, and I think that's the other thing. There was this emotional, so there was psychological abuse, where he would often say, you did this, therefore, it is okay that I am doing this to you. Parents are supposed to, discipline their children or punish their children. And the thing about my dad, and this is, again, me, years of, I've been in therapy for, a good 12 years, dissecting and unpacking all of these different things. And, one of the things that I realized, was that he was trying to normalize this behavior. And so it almost was like, and then he was also, the psychological abuse was very much like, anytime there was an abusive situation that happened, he would then sit me down and he would tell me what happened. And then he'd make me replay it. And so today, like several of my memories, they're very confused because of this sort of psychological trauma. But the interesting thing that I've learned going through therapy and additional just learning and studying is that a lot of your abuse is stored in your body. Yeah. So if you have a memory, you will feel it in your body, and you might have a memory, or your memory could be disconnected, but you can still feel it in your body. So anyway, I think, there were several situations growing up, a lot of abuse, a lot of physical, verbal. There was a lot of, words like, you're stupid, you're nothing, you're not, you're never going to amount to anything. And this is not just like one day, this is like on a continual basis. And the thing of it is that it was this interesting, I would say, dance, because my dad was the abuser. My mother was also abused, and I don't want to talk much about her, but my mother was also abused, and I think it's important to explain the situation. But she was also somebody who witnessed it happening and allowed it. And so for me growing up, it was like, okay, I have this abuser. It's somebody who's supposed to be a protector. They're not protecting me. And I have this other person who's supposed to be loving and nurturing and protecting, and neither of them are. And both of them are saying that I'm unlovable and that I'm not good. And so I grew up with this very, just this feeling of a lack of worth, a lack of being enough. I felt very much like, I felt unloved, and I often describe it in my writing, I felt like no one, because the two people who are supposed to be your biggest advocates, your biggest mentors, the ones that cheer you on, even if you can't sing well, were the two that were kind of like, no, yeah, you're just not that great, And so I had this feeling of being unloved, and they were very disconnected. So there wasn't a lot of love in my family. The abuse, there were times that, it was, slapping me in the face or hitting me in the head with, like an open hand. There were times that it was, with a belt and the buckle. And then oftentimes the other part that happened with it would be this, as I mentioned, this sort of sitting me down and explaining to me what happened, in sort of a recreation of the situation. And yes. And then it often would end, like, again, I call it this dance. The dance would end with my father in some way compensating me. So it would be money or when I was younger, it would be maybe a really nice toy or a present, look at, now you're being good. You get to have this thing. See, I love you.
So
and as I got older,
you're not actually seeing that as a bad thing. And then when you're getting a tire, like whatever you're getting out of it, you're like, okay, maybe this is how it needs to be. Your mind will be adjusting to that kind of a thing after a while if you are getting treated every single time like that. And one more question.
Right.
At the age of 10, you mentioned that you started drinking. So how were you able to get your hands on drinking? Was your parents knowing about it? Are they okay with it? Or like, what is happening behind that?
Yeah. I grew up in a family, I would say, where drugs, alcohol were sort of out in the open. There was drugs around, there was alcohol around. So it was pretty easy for me to get alcohol if I wanted to. My parents had parties. We would go to houses that were having parties that were probably not kid appropriate. So the access was there. And, and up until that age, I had never really thought about it. I knew it was something that people did when they were older, but it was, it was that feeling of like sadness that made me kind of think about how I could escape. Yeah. So I would say, the next moment in my life where there was sort of, I know, Smitha, when we chatted previously, you had asked, like, what was a rock bottom, these moments in our lives. And so I think this next big milestone in my life was definitely a rock bottom. So because of how I grew up, the abuse, verbal, physical, emotional, me finding different ways of coping. So one of those ways was alcohol. Another way that I had picked up between 10 and 14 was I would cut myself. So it would, I had a little box and I would find ways to cut my body. And it was this way of, it's hard to describe, but it was a way to release the pain. It was almost like I needed the pain to get out of me somehow. And I didn't know, how to do it. And so alcohol was one way, drinking, and then also this, this cutting. And then the other way that I had picked up was it's interesting talking about these things, but like, I wanted this feeling of love and connection. And I couldn't get it from my parents. I didn't have any sort of mentor or advocate. I wasn't in sports. We didn't have very much money, so I wasn't in any sport. My dad was he was a narcissistic, very controlled, and paranoid person. So we didn't have a lot of friends. So there was like nobody in my life except for like this situation.
Yeah.
And so I had, everything, at 10, it was like, okay, I need to survive this. Right. And so by 14, by 12 to 14, I had picked up a new coping mechanism, which was giving my body, like I wanted to be with someone. And now I knew, just, kissing a boy or being with a boy wasn't necessarily love. Yeah. But it was a connection that I had never felt. This connection.
Yeah, just at least giving you that kind of importance. They wanted to be with you there.
Yes. And even if it was a moment, it was like a moment of warmth and connection that was so powerful for me. And so by, 12 to 14, I had picked up this new coping mechanism. And at 14, I had sex for the first time. And I'd met a boy who was 17, who was also, did alcohol, drank and did drugs. And I became pregnant. And so this was, at 14, thinking back at the time, you feel so old and like you have so many years and that a lot. Yeah. At the time, but looking back, I didn't even understand that you could get pregnant. I really didn't. It had everything to do with me feeling and getting this connection that I just didn't have. And so I became pregnant, and, in this moment, even in this moment, like I feel like rock bottoms are these lessons that we learn throughout our life. And sometimes we're not ready for them. You hit a bottom and something bad happens and you're like, all right, well, and in this moment, and I remember it, I was at this point, I was an angry 14-year-old, and I was in survival mode. I had how to cope with my situation. And I really felt like the world was against me. I had finally found somebody who could love me and be with me. And now I get pregnant. Like, this is going to ruin it all. And so I had to go tell my parents. And so they were adamant, I was to get an abortion. And they were not going to drive me there. The boy had to drive me. And I was to go have this done on my own, since I got myself in this situation. And the boy was and I call him a boy. At the time, I thought he was a man, but I call him a boy because he still was a boy. But, and then he had to come up with the money. So again, had this very disconnected relationship with my family. And then now I have to go through this very traumatic situation on my own. Yeah. Well, with the boy was there. He was, so this was certainly a rock bottom, situation. And I think in this moment I realized, okay, I am not invincible. So I do think that there was a lesson out of it that I learned. Like, I'm not invincible. When bad things happen, like sometimes you have, like, there are repercussions, right? Up until this point, I really hadn't had my behavior, the things that I was engaging in, drinking, drugs, sex, like nothing had happened. And this was like that first moment. But I ignored it. And I will say, I was also throughout, I think probably when I was 16, I became much more interested in where am I going? What's my career? I knew I was kind of a couple years away from getting out of my house. And I knew that I needed to leave. Now, in my mind at that time, I did not associate that I was in survival mode, but I knew that I wanted to leave and I wanted to be on my own. So I think the other significant part, like at 16, I got a job with a health and wellness company, and I was exposed to a different type of people and a different type of life. And I think it was at this point that I was like, oh, okay, well, there's more options out there than I had really ever been exposed to. And so this sort of started my path on being in, that, like, what do I want to do with my life? But it was, so like that was from 16 to 19. I really was on this path. But then, I hit this point once I graduated. I think another significant point in my life, I graduated. So again, at this point, I was like a manager of this health and wellness, a manager at that company. I had decided, okay, well, I'm graduating from high school. And not everybody, my parents had not graduated from high school. So this was a really big deal, but I also wanted to go to college, but I was also, on the fence of, I didn't know what I wanted to do. Yeah. So I decided to go to a community college, and what this next significant point in my life was, this professor, I was not doing very well in school. I was getting a D in this English class, and he had called me and said, can you stop by my office so we can talk about your latest test? And he brings me in and he says, do you know why you didn't do well on that exam? And I said, and he was very serious. And so I was, very serious back and very transparent. I was like, I'm just not smart. I've never really been smart. It's where I come from. I'm just, it's just who I am. And he kind of chuckled, and his demeanor changed a little bit from this very serious. And I was, and I looked at him, and he was just like, Alicia, there is a big difference between not being smart and not applying yourself. And you are the latter. And it was in this moment that I just had this really big, like, I would say my first real awakening, where I realized, and I pondered this for the longest time. So I left his office, and then, like, for 2 weeks, this just sat with me and marinated with me, where I was thinking about, wait, am I not applying myself? Like, it's so amazing how your belief system can shape how you show up in life. And that's what was happening to me.
A professor was able to see your worth than your parents or you or yourself.
Right. And that's it, the worth. He was able to, and that's the thing. And I keep meaning I need to reach out back out to him, because I'm now telling this story that I need to, like, tell him. But he, like, for the first time, I felt like I had been seen. And to be seen is to be known, and to be known is to be alive. So I felt this like awakening happen within me, and I couldn't really understand it at the time. I articulate it much better than I probably could have at that time, because it was very profound. But, I spent 2 weeks, and I thought about it, and I decided, okay, is this really true? And I kind of didn't believe him, because of this very strong belief system. But I decided in this moment, I'm going to take the next 1 year, and I'm going to try to apply myself to whatever it is. And I'm just going to do that. And it's going to be an experiment, and maybe nothing happens. And I kind of wanted to prove him wrong. And so I did a myriad of things. I decided that I was going to be the princess of my hometown. So I applied and interviewed, and I took second place. I, tried out for a play, and I got a part. I decided that I was going to go, there was a local, fashion designer who was trying to generate money, and he was doing shows, fashion shows. And so I went and I talked to him, and I became one of his fashion models. It was, just like these random things. And after this year, I was like, oh my gosh, like, if I apply myself, if I decide to do something and I apply myself, I can actually do it. And this was very profound to me, because I didn't believe it. But the thing that would happen is that this whole year of this profound sort of awakening was a really big piece of my life. But then what happened was, I still had this side of me. So this is sort of my, the side of me that's the career oriented and the driven side. And then there's this other side that is the person that needs the love, right? So this is like fulfilling this academic and career piece. But then there was this love side. So I now, at this point, I accomplished all of this. I applied, and then at this time, I also got my first corporate job in technology, which is a very long story, but I got it by applying myself, and literally I stalked the director of the department and said, you are going to hire me, and got the job. But it's a long story, so I'm not going to go into that. But all of this would come to a little bit of a halt because I still needed love, and I was still drinking, and I was still doing drugs, but I was very controlled with it. My coping strategies were, I was so controlled with my coping strategies. It was like between these hours, I was a planner with my coping strategies. So from 8 to 5, I had to work. From 5 to 10, I went to school. And then it was like I had this schedule of when I could be free and be released from the pain that was in my insides. And so at 19, I met my next very serious boyfriend, who also was heavily involved with drugs and alcohol. And, we had a connection. Looking back, I tended to date men that were like my father. And, in this moment, like, I think it was that first year that I was dating him, I had multiple things happen. I had the crown taken away from me because I got pulled over, ended up with 8 tickets for drinking while intoxicated. With this, I lost my license, which made it really difficult to drive to my job, to make ends meet. And I will say, in this moment, this lesson was one that I learned. So in this moment, when all of this happened, it was a very big wake-up call to me that you need to change the way that you're, like, if you want this over here, you have to change what you're doing over here. And now I did shift and adjust. I still continue to date this man for the next 4 years. Wow. But I decided, I knew what I wanted. I wanted to go to school. I wanted to be in technology. I wanted to continue to push myself to grow. At this time, so this was like from 19 to 25 or 24, this was a period where I would have never said that I was abused. I would have said that we had a difficult, my dad was a difficult man to please. He was very controlling. I may not have even said that, but it was very soft, right? In how I would have, what's that?
Kind of a polished way to put it.
Yes, it was. And I really had not accepted that. I had not accepted what had happened to me. And when so this brings me to the next big milestone, which was, I was like 25, 26. And I was, again, my career was going great. I had to continue to progress in my career. I became a senior or a project manager. I was, there was a lot that I was doing. I knew I was capable at this point. I know I'm capable, but I still have this longing for a relationship. And I had broken up with the second boyfriend there. And this man who is not like any of the other men that I have met. And he's what I would have called at the time normal. And it was this experience of like, oh my, like, if I'm going to be with somebody and be in a really positive relationship, I need to go to therapy. And at the time, when I went in and I met this first therapist, I said, hi, my name's Alicia. I am broken. And I just need you to put me back together because I met this guy and I'm thinking, that we could maybe have a relationship, but I'm not good at relationships is what I told her. And again, I had no idea that there was anything stemming from my family, but this would be sort of the starting point of my unpacking and uncovering that all of this pain that I had talked about all of my life, and I've written all of my life, I've written poems, I've written in my diary, my journal, all of this pain I had talked about, it was stemming from this abuse that I had been, I had throughout my life. And at this point, when I was 25, I was still having the verbal and emotional abuse. And what I had uncovered was every time I would talk to my dad, who would call me probably every couple weeks, my mom would call me every week, but I would be triggered by it. And it would be this moment, and now I wouldn't have used this language, but what I uncovered through that first year of therapy was I had a very toxic relationship with everybody in my family. And I spent a lot of time with them. And now looking back, and even, it's uncomfortable almost for me to say that I had all this abuse. I was completely disconnected that it happened. And I allowed them to be in my life after I had moved out, and was then being triggered every time we talked.
Yeah.
And it was affecting my emotional state, but I didn't recognize it. So that first year of therapy was the most powerful thing. And I think what it made me realize was, wow, I have a lot of work. We're not going to be able to do this in a couple of sessions, is what you're telling me.
But at least you were able to identify yourself, like, yes, you need some help. You yourself checked into your therapy and thought through, like, yes, I wanted to get some help to get through my life in a proper way. That
Yes.
it was a big change. How did that thought come for you, like, to even try for a therapy? Is that just for looking for a relationship at the point of time, or like, is there anything else that you wanted to do and you wanted to get better in your emotional way?
Yeah. I would say it was I had realized that while I was not using drugs and alcohol as much, at this point in my life, I was using sex quite a bit. So I had replaced the cutting, the drinking, some of those things with something else.
Yeah.
And I think on some, very surface level, I think I recognized, okay, the way I would have described it at that time is I would have said, the relationships that I'm having are not really healthy. But what was happening is I was having sex with multiple people. And I think what looking back, I think, having sex with people was a way for me to get, it was like a drug. Where it was a connection. And it was like I was collecting these connections to make me feel whole. And I think in the moment, when I first started doing this, it was like, okay, I could do it, have sex with one person and it would last me a certain amount of time. And I think what had happened at this time was that it was like I needed to be doing it a lot more than when I started. And I realized that having sex with multiple partners but yet I wanted a relationship was just probably that there was something more underlying that I probably needed to figure out. I didn't know what that was, but I knew that it wasn't healthy. And I also knew that somehow deep down I had replaced some of my other things with this way of living. And so I think so it was mainly that, I think, and meeting somebody who was, I realized that there was sort of like, in this moment, I had hope that I could be with somebody that was kind. I could be with somebody that would treat me with respect. I could be with somebody that wasn't a womanizer or that wasn't doing drugs or, I could be with somebody else. It was a choice. But I also knew that the way that I was living was probably not going to be conducive to that relationship. So I think it was that. That was, a really big turning point in my life. I am now married to that man. Awesome. And yes, we just celebrated our 10-year anniversary this past weekend. Yes, thank you. We've been together, but celebrating years. He has been, in that first, probably, like, I found the therapist, I went through therapy, and then we started dating. But I will tell you that first, month, I told him everything about myself. Everything. It was like, hi, my name's Alicia. These are all the things that have happened to me that you should know about. And I think he was kind of like, we joke about it now. At the time, he may have thought I was a little crazy. And he also thought, he said, you were the most interesting person I had ever met. I wanted to keep going out with you mainly because I never knew what you were going to say. And so I found you really interesting. And I think looking back, I think I was trying to, almost push him away. Like, hey, here is all the crap about me. You don't want to be involved. Yeah. And he was like, no, like, who are you to decide? And I was like, oh, okay.
Let's try one more round.
Yes. And so anyway, so we started dating, but, we've had, because of the abuse, I think I've also, my relationship with him and going through therapy has been vital to where I'm at today, even, my relationship today. The abuse that I suffered has really, I have issues with connection, as I've shared, and connecting with my husband on this deeper level. It's very easy for me to connect physically, but connecting on a deeper level is much more difficult. I think, even just having kids, it wasn't, I think having children was another sort of turning point where I was deathly afraid of having kids, but I didn't know why. I thought it was because I was a career-focused woman and was afraid that my husband wanted me to stay at home and take care of kids, which was not the case. And after I've kind of unpacked that, I've realized I was so afraid of being like my parents. Yes. I was fearful, what if this is a gene? What if like bad parenting and abuse is a gene that's handed down? And I've done a lot of writing and researching about this. And now, while it's not a gene handed down, there is this idea of generational trauma. Yeah. And oftentimes people who have experienced trauma take that trauma and they do the same thing to their loved one, to the people that they love. And in this moment, as I was, when we got pregnant, I was just like, I will not be that way. And the moment that I held her was this profound moment, because it was like my heart opened up for the first time in this very real way. And I realized the beauty of like infinite love. Yes. And I realized in this moment, like, it was never me. Yep. It was not me. It was always them. It was their own stuff.
Until you identify that part of like, problem is not with me, it is with someone else. Until you dig deeper and point that out, you will always have these questions and restrictions to yourself.
Definitely. Yes. Yes. So that was a big turning point, having, but leading up to that, I was so fearful, of having kids. And it's something, I think the other thing I've realized about childhood trauma, or any trauma is something that lives with you. Definitely. And it's something that anybody who has gone through trauma, you're always working through it. You're always getting better at it. It's like an onion. You peel one layer and then you're like, I got through it, to the next layer. And you're like, oh man, there's more.
Yes. You'll be peeling forever sometimes. That's how I feel too.
Yeah. Well, I think the beauty of it though, and I've thought a lot about it, and like I take a lot of classes and, as for coaching and just continual education. But one of the most beautiful things that I've heard on this concept of, it's like, where you're at right now, you can only heal so much. And then you grow and your lens is different. And then only then are you able to heal the other parts of yourself. Mm-hmm. And so it's this continual process, but it's also your evolutionary process of growth, right? You continue to grow and shed those other pieces of you, and you continue to evolve. Mm-hmm. So, so through having my children, there was definitely this sense of evolution. And then, like I said, coming back to like what I mentioned at the beginning, and then also just 2 years ago, being able, well, a year ago, I guess, April 2019, being able to share some of me, the real me, with this group of women. And I shared with them actually a poem, like I shared with them something I had written, which I had never even shared any of my writing with anybody, because the writing came from this deep pain that I didn't want anybody to know. And I really didn't write anything at that time that was very happy. So it was like, I didn't want to share it because it was like from my insides. But I shared it with them, and that was another like this moment. And then just 6 weeks ago, leaving my job and going, no, like I am supposed to, this is part of my evolution. I've shed now this, I think for me, I realized as much as I loved my corporate career, I loved what I was doing, I loved the people, I loved the growth, I loved the leadership. I realized that I traded each time I was coping. I was trading in one coping mechanism for another. And for me, being in corporate was this beautiful way to, it was a way for me to get worthiness. It was a way to get a grade, so to speak, right? As you continue to climb the corporate ladder, you get praise, you know, and I needed that. And I think what I've realized over the last probably 6 months is I don't need that anymore because I've grown.
Yes.
And now my next evolution is to help other women experience the same growth and the same evolution because we're all capable of it.
Yes.
The only other thing that I wanted to just mention is, you know, I think it's taken me this long, you know, I'm 41, to come to this conclusion that my story is my foundation. And I think before, what I believed was that my story, my past, was something that was to be ashamed of. It was something to hide from, something to put in a closet and not show anybody. And I think all of what I've realized and really kind of come full circle on is your story, all of our stories, like we all have stuff.
True.
It is all, this story is our foundation. And our story doesn't have to prevent you from what you do today or what you do tomorrow.
100%.
But my story, it definitely did. It prevented me so much. And I love that I'm, you know, I'm on the other side to some extent with a lot of it, but I'm also I recognize I'm continuing, as we talked about, you know, peeling back the layers and unpacking. And, you know, I continue to evolve in this story as well.
So my question to you right now, you mentioned that you are working as a coach. The question that I have is like, people talk about forgiveness. When you mentioned like, yes, when you realized that the problem is not with you, it is with them, that's where you realized like, okay, I can let go of things. People often talk about like forgiveness. How far do you actually like accept that forgiving other people? There are certain things or certain acts that other people might have done is not something that can be forgivable. So when I say that, what do you exactly mean by forgiving other person? How much deeper it goes into? Is it like that you are forgiving them for the act they have done to you? Well, let's just say, for example, the worst example I can pick of, if somebody is raping, they are in full conscious when they're doing it. And as a rapist, how do you say like, yes, I forgive the person? What is the reason behind forgiving them? I mean, is there something that you feel like, okay, they have some kind of a trauma on me? Because no, that's not correct. So
right.
How do you say that?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting question. The question of forgiveness. You know, I think about that with my dad, and I think in the beginning, I kept trying to forgive him. I don't know that I'm not sure what the word is to articulate here. I don't know that it's forgiveness, because I don't know how I can forgive somebody who abused me so consistently throughout my life. But what I can say, and I think the other thing that I learned is that that I've learned through all of this is like holding on to all of that pain and all of the things that happened. The only thing that it does is it holds me in purgatory. it hurts me by hanging on to it. So I think it's more letting go of the experience, or like accepting the experience, working through the experience, and then letting it go or releasing it in some way. I don't know that it's forgiveness. In my case, I don't know that I can say, like, I really did try. Like I have letters that I've written to him, and I've gone to the house and I've said, I forgive you, but I really didn't. And I don't, cause I really don't like the word forgiveness mean, you know, I think that would be interesting to look up. Like, is the word forgiveness to let go? You know, and so I think it is a matter of letting go and recognizing that you have the power. You have the power to move forward. So cutting that or disconnecting it and letting it go is the only way I feel like that you can move forward. But you do have to process it.
Yeah. Processing it, digesting it, and understanding like that we cannot hold up to it forever and live in that pain.
No.
Set yourself to freedom up. And then, yeah, I mean,
Yes.
that's what I feel like forgiving, in the sense you are forgiving that thing happened to you. You are
Right.
letting it go out of your system. You're not actually like
Yes.
telling the other person, like, whatever you have done to me, it is okay. I can be.
Exactly.
It's not that.
Exactly.
I've been hearing that a lot from everybody saying, like, I forgive the person who did wrong to me. I don't think actually anybody can really forget and forgive whatever happened to them, because you have been through that pain, you have been through the trauma
Yep.
for years, and then at the end of it, you just come simply and say, like, yes, I have forgiven. I really don't know how the forgiveness comes around.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah,
Right. I
my
do think it's a matter of letting that go. I also heard, I don't know who, I'm going to quote it, but I don't know who said it, but it's not me. And it was something that was really powerful when I read it, and it really sat with me, which is, my story is not a life sentence.
exactly.
And that is such a beautiful phrase. And there are times when if I'm stuck in it, or I'm, you know, getting pulled down into it, I remember that. It's like, no, because we do have the control. But it is about that healing process, and it's all different, you know, for all of us. You know, it's taken me my entire life to even just call it out, recognize it, you know, and I shouldn't say my entire life. I have much more life ahead of me, but for a long period, you know, but it takes whatever time it takes for you, each of us, to process it and go through those different layers to understand it and accept it and then move forward. You know, whatever relationships we have that are toxic, it's so important to recognize these relationships when it's happening. And it's okay, I feel like, for any of us to then end those relationships, whether it's family, whether it's somebody that you're married to, whatever it is. So for me, and I'm saying this because of my experience, you know, I felt like I had to keep my family in my life because they are my family, and they are, for the longest time, they're the only people that I had in my life, right? And so, but after I've gone through therapy, and that's like the first thing that we did over that first year, it was like, no, you are your own person. You get to decide, you get to choose what your boundary is and what you feel comfortable with. And when she told me that, when she was like, you have the power to decide, I was like, I don't have to talk to my mom every week. I don't have to talk to my dad every time he calls me. And she was like, no, like, but these are things that, and I don't know if it's like, I do think that as I talk to different females, different women, I think we think this,
Yes.
like, whether it's our family or if it's a friend or whatever, it is okay. I give all of you permission to let go of your toxic relationships. And I'm not saying it's that easy, right? It's not easy to just be like, okay, don't call me. Yeah. But I think the first step is to recognize if you have a toxic relationship. And then it's like coming up with a plan to then end that relationship, because you get to decide, and you are important, and it is your choice.
It's just not even about, it's funny that you mentioned like toxic relationship. For me, it is like, when I look at it, even I slowly, like past few years, I've been feeling that a lot. And I'm trying to, like, as you said, it's not like picking up the call and telling them like not to call me, but at the same time, I'm kind of like disconnecting from every person, that treat me like I'm unworthy, or I don't really, I mean, they don't really care about me, or any of that sort. That gives you a lot of inner peace. And as you mentioned, like your power is back at you. You
Right.
don't have to answer to anybody. You're not responsible for anybody. You are your own person, and you take care of your family or the very next thing that you have. That's all.
Yes.
That is really, really good, because few of times when you're mentioning about those things, I can resonate with myself a lot, actually, because I've been going through that phase right now with anybody and everybody that I'm having, be it like a friends, family, or anybody. I'm trying to have that disconnected thing with everybody, like slowly.
Hmm.
When I'm talking to them, I don't really feel like it's a great feeling that I don't have. Then I'm like, why am I even wasting my time just to make them happy that I'm talking to them?
Exactly.
Doesn't really matter
It's,
to me. So yeah, just don't waste time.
yeah. Yeah. I think taking that power back, that was like such an important thing that you just mentioned, because that is what you're doing when you decide
True.
whether it's and I think all of us right now, because of everything that's happening in the world, I think we're all kind of assessing, like, who are those people that make us feel good, and who are those people, because there's so much draining us right now given everything that's occurring around us. So it's, I think, really natural to then go, okay, who are the people that are also draining me, and start to separate yourself and take back your own power. Because yeah, exactly, that was just very beautiful what you said.
Do you still have connection with your parents? Do you talk to them now, or like, are they involved in your life still?
Yeah, so it was about 4 years ago that since working through therapy, I had really separated, and really kind of made the choice of like, okay, I'm only talking to my dad when I choose to. And so I had really kind of separated from him. So our relationship was already very, we didn't talk much. And I saw him, maybe he had this requirement. He was, again, very controlling. So he had a requirement that there were 7 holidays that I was required to be at his house.
Hmm.
And I couldn't get out of it. It was the requirement. And so slowly I had stopped talking to him. And then I set the boundary of, here are the 2 that I'm going to come to. And that was like such a powerful moment. So we had really not seen or talked to each other very much. And then the several times that I'd gone to forgive him and read him these forgiveness letters, right? And then I think it was about 4 years ago, actually, a incident happened where I had just decided that I'm just not going to have him in my life. My youngest daughter was then 1, and we had a falling out. So we hadn't talked for probably 6 months, because he had said something to me. I don't remember what it was. And I had then set the boundary and was like, okay, we're not going to talk. Well, then he had called me because it was my birthday, and he had said he really wanted to see me and wanted to spend time with me, and he loved me and he was so proud of me. And these are the things that he would do. So showers me with, these beautiful words. And I'm like, okay, all right, let's get together. And so I had, but I made sure it was in a public place. I had, I never knew what my dad would do. So like, even with the kids, I wasn't quite sure, but I was like, it needs to be in a public place. It has to be like over the lunch hour, so we're not drinking, like, like just keep it very, so nothing can happen. And so we had met up there, but he had got 2 days beforehand, he got really upset at me because I was bringing my kids. And he was just like, I just wanted to spend time with you. Why are you bringing your children? Then I won't be able to see you or talk to you. And I was like, okay, well, here's where I'm going to be, and here's what time. It's your choice whether you decide to come. And I was just decided, we're just going to move forward with the plans that we had set. So I went there with my family. My mom was there, my sister, like there were other people there. And so we had lunch. He wouldn't talk to me though the entire time. At that, in the middle of lunch, he handed me an envelope with money in it and said, I love you. But didn't talk to me the rest of the time. So then at the end of our lunch, everybody else is gone. My husband went to bring the kids, or went to bring my oldest to the bathroom. And it was just me with my youngest. Sorry, he brought my oldest to the bathroom. My youngest is with me, and she's 1. So she's like kind of sitting on my hip like this. And my father is standing across from me. and or really close to me. And I don't remember what he said, but what he did was he took my daughter's hand and slapped me across the face as hard as he could. And then he said something derogatory and then walked out. And in this moment, and because of all of the rewriting of my history that my father had done, I was like, gosh, did I even remember that correct? Like, why would somebody do that? So then but then one day later, it came full circle because I'm laying in bed with my oldest and she's crying. And I said, what's wrong, honey? And she said, why did grandpa teach my sissy how to slap really hard? And I realized in this moment that her and my husband had come around the corner and she had seen it. Oh. And in that moment, I was like, I cannot have my kids around him because he is so volatile and you never know what he's going to do. True. And he denies that it ever happened. And so I just decided, so he is not in my life. My mother has chose to stay with him and be, and she won't, because of his controlling nature, he has to go everywhere with her. And so I gave her the choice. It was like, I can't have him around my kids, around my family. And I'm choosing that. And so you get to choose whether you want to have your grandkids in your life and me in your life. And, it's your choice. And so I've seen her a few times a year. And that's really been it, unfortunately.
Do you carry any guilt that you're not having connection or like disconnecting people that you feel they're toxic in your life?
I think not my father. I would say there's no guilt at all. I think the one relationship that I probably struggle with is just the disconnecting with my mother. But this is actually something I've been recently working through. The thing that I've realized is like, I gave her the choice. So it's actually not me, right? She gets to choose, and she's choosing, just like she always has, to, ignore the situation, and she's choosing, him. And so that's her choice. And so I think, that was one that I've struggled with probably for the longest time, but just recently I have come a full circle on that one and gone, you know what? I actually have released all of my feelings of sadness that, do I want her in my life? I do. And I would choose to have her in my life, but she chooses not to be. So I have to accept that. Outside of that, there are other relationships that through my family dynamic, I've severed. I don't feel guilty about any of them. I think every time I've thought about it, it's like, I choose myself. I love myself. And I think that it's a form of loving yourself enough to go, I am enough and I'm worthy. And I don't need them in my life. And I am okay with that.
Okay, thank you for tuning in. And you can find me on all the socials at Smitha and the show notes for any resources mentioned. See you next week. Take care.